Are you a foreign national who has been arrested and don't know what to do? Do you have friends or family members facing criminal charges and fear they may be deported? If you are, then you will want to stay tuned and find out what to do. Today, you will find out what to do if you are a foreign national and get arrested. I think you'll be surprised at what crimes may or may not cause you immigration problems. At the end of today's discussion, we'll give tips on how to stay in the U.S. Good morning, everyone. I'm Anthony Ray. I'm one of the attorneys here at Ray Law International. Let me share that our hearts, thoughts, and prayers are with the Ukrainian people. President Zelensky's speech shows why this war is wrong and the way this war is taking the lives of our friends, family, and fellow global citizens. Let's do what we can to help and support Ukraine. With that said, let me turn our attention to today's video. Lauren and Saki are here with me today. So let me turn it over to them to give their introductions. Lauren, you're up.
Hello, my name is Lauren. I'm one of the attorneys here at Ray Law. Welcome, everybody. Like Anthony said, this webinar is about criminal issues and their impacts on immigration. So feel free to leave any questions, comments you may have in general or specific. We'll also have our information for how to contact us on the screen occasionally. So if you'd like to set up a free 15-minute consultation to discuss your case more privately, please feel free to do so. Or please let us know any other questions you may have. We're more than happy to jump in and answer those questions as we see them. Saki?
Good morning from Chicago. My name is Saki. I work at the Chicago office, legal assistant. I hope everyone's doing well. The weather is getting nicer. I'm happy about it. Hopefully we get more happy news, no more sad news. Today we're going to talk about the crime, and also I'm going to speak Japanese a little bit. おはようございます。シカゴオフィスの佐田池です。本日は、犯罪に関してのお話ですね。今回、その犯罪等がどのように移民法にも影響してくるのかということに関して、お話をさせていただきます。もしですね、ご質問等ございましたら、E メールアドレス、または電話番号を載せておきますので、そちらの方にご連絡していただければと思います。またですね、チャットの方も開いておりますので、日本語でももちろん問題ございませんので、ご質問等あれば、どしどしご連絡ください。よろしくお願いします。Okay, so I hope everyone's ready. Let's start the first question to Anthony. So I want to come to the United States for vacation using the ESTA system as a visitor. I have a couple speeding ticket in my home country. Should I be concerned about this?
Well, Saki, very good question. And I think all of us, if we're honest, we probably have a speeding ticket or some traffic violation. The good thing from the U.S. side, one or two speeding tickets is more or less a civil infraction. And, it's not going to be that much of a problem. Now, of course, each country is different. Each country has their own laws. Some countries are more strict than the U.S. However, because we're really focused on U.S. law, certain traffic violations such as parking tickets, speeding tickets, within reason are not a problem. Obviously, too much of a good thing or in excess can be problematic. So if you get to the point where your speeding tickets, parking tickets escalates your crime to something more than just a civil infraction, then, that may be problematic. For example, if you get so many speeding tickets that you start to endanger the public, or you cause property damage or commit some other crime connected to that speeding ticket, and you end up spending time in jail, those are situations where it goes beyond just paying a fine in a court to something more serious. So As long as we're talking simple speeding tickets, you pay your fine, you're done, you're not going to have a problem, and that's not going to come up or be on the radar what ESTA is looking at. Otherwise, I think, more than half of the people who use ESTA might have to be reporting their tickets, and that would cause a big backlog in the process. So simply on a simple level, no, you don't have to mention that. But if it's serious or you spend time in jail, you're going to want to bring that up and speak with an immigration attorney to make sure that you're not going to have problems. You always want to make sure you tell the truth in your applications for the immigration benefit you're seeking. So make sure you watch that. Speeding tickets should be fine.
All right, good to know. How about this one? Okay, this question is to Lauren. My boyfriend was arrested for drunk driving multiple times in his home country. Does he need to disclose this on an ESTA application?
So the short answer to this is yes. Drunk driving, although it is a traffic offense, it can range into the criminal aspect, especially if there's multiple arrests or citations issues with this. There's also the issue of, is this person an alcoholic or does this person have some sort of substance abuse problem? So you should definitely disclose this. If for some reason you do not disclose this on your ESTA application and the person reviewing it finds out or it triggers some sort of red flag in their system, you could be barred permanently from actually obtaining ESTA. And you would then have to obtain a B2 visa, which is a lot more intensive process. It's more money, and you would have to renew it every 10 years. So definitely want to try to avoid that. Just be honest and disclose everything. Saki?
Thank you, Lauren. I see. So let's change the topic. This question is to Anthony. I work in the IT sector as an H-1B programmer analyst for the state of New Jersey. My work requires me to develop and maintain their system related to the state cannabis industry. Can I do this work?
Very, very good question. And as we see more and more states bringing on cannabis and marijuana, legalizing it in recreational or even just medical marijuana, this is becoming more and more a part of our life here in the U.S. The problem, as everyone may know right now, is at the state level, many states provide that a certain amount of marijuana is legal for recreation, while at the federal level, it is still illegal. So we have this conflict of law, and unfortunately, immigration is federal based. So it still is a problem for all foreign nationals. Obviously, if you're a foreign national, even a green card holder, avoid cannabis and marijuana 100%. Don't take a chance. You still have to be honest about what you say on applications in the future, whether that's for citizenship or some other immigration benefit. So in this scenario, we actually had a client who experienced this, and IT, you wouldn't think about it except, hey, they're providing IT support to a state, one of the 50 states in the US, and, the USCIS said, this is a violation. And, and unfortunately, the USCIS would not approve this because, they're dealing with something that the federal government deems illegal. So anytime, no matter what your job is, whether it's the medical field, research, be careful whenever you're getting into the areas of something that the federal government deems to be illegal. Check with your immigration attorney, especially as a foreign national. You don't want to take those risks or chances, especially with cannabis, as it's being legalized in many states throughout the U.S. So this can affect your work. Be careful. Ask your immigration attorney. Okay?
Thank you, Anthony. Okay, so how about this one to Lauren? My friend from Mexico uses marijuana, but it is fully legalized there. Does she have to disclose her marijuana use on the B2 application?
So the answer to this one would be no. The B2 application does not specifically say, have you ever used marijuana? The B2 application has more general questions about have you ever been convicted or used illegal substances, something like that, to that effect. And in this case, in Mexico specifically, marijuana is not only decriminalized, but it is fully legal at a federal and state level. So therefore, this person has committed no crimes and does not need to disclose anything to that effect on their application. Similarly, you can think of it almost like drinking alcohol. Many countries allow you to drink alcohol when you turn 18 years old. In the US, that age is 21, obviously. So in that case, would you have to disclose that you've drank alcohol when you were 19 years old? No, you would not, because it was fully legal in your country at that time. So, just keeping in mind there, if there's no crime committed in your country for this aspect, then no, you would not need to disclose. Saki?
Okay, thank you, Lauren. All right, so now the change in another topic. This question to Anthony. My wife is in the H4 status, and then 2 years ago, she pleaded guilty to shoplifting. However, when we filed her I-485, we forgot to disclose it. The interview is now scheduled. What should we do?
Well, Saki, this is a problem that we see all the time here at our office where, people fail to disclose information, or don't think it's important, or maybe they intentionally want to, save themselves from embarrassment and they just don't disclose it to us. But it is so critical. What I usually tell our clients is, if there's some crime or some activity where there's been some arrest, the USCIS is going to find out anyways. They already know it. Therefore, make sure from the beginning when you complete your questionnaire with your attorney or start working with your attorney, you need to disclose this. We do it at our firm through completing the questionnaire and making sure that people answer. Now, even though it's on there on the questionnaire, some people, don't think of it, don't recall it. But when you go through these questionnaires completed by your attorneys, take the time to really think. Don't rush through it as just like a homework assignment that just has to be turned in tomorrow. And yes, we know you want your green card. We know you want that immigration benefit, but you gotta make sure that you give us all the information, all that historical information. If it's a J1 visa that you had when you were 18 and you're subject to the 2-year foreign residency requirement, we need to know. Now, turning to the H4 situation here, there is some hope. Now, what you want to do is, if you can, prior to the interview, get that information, let the officer know that, hey, I made a mistake. Here's the correct information. I would also, first and foremost, take a revised or updated I-485, have it set up, prepared, just in case. Now, during the interview, the officer is going to go through and confirm your application. Most of them do. So that is an opportune time to modify or update your application. But if the officer misses it, be proactive. Let them know. Don't wait and guess to see if they're going to ask you that question or not and think you got away with it. Make sure you are proactive, disclose, be honest and forthright. That's going to help you so much throughout the immigration process. So in this case, go to the interview, take an amended or updated I-485 just in case. And then at the interview, if the officer allows you, go ahead and make that modification. And then, explain to the officer. Make sure you have both the police report and the court documents necessary to support that. If, for example, if you had probation, make sure you show that you completed the probation. So, unfortunately, shoplifting is quite often quite common. Just one note before we move on to the next one. Remember, In shoplifting, you really, really do want to try to fight these, okay? Don't just get, a court-appointed attorney and just plead directly to that. Try to get it reduced or, if at all possible, thrown out. Anytime you can keep a clean record, it's going to make your immigration process all the more smooth as you go throughout. If you leave those on there, each time you have an immigration issue, whether that's a visa stamp or a green card, you're going to have to face this and deal with this. So there is hope. Make sure you work with your immigration attorney in order to make sure that you have everything in order. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Anthony. Okay, so next question is to Lauren. My criminal lawyer told me that I should agree to court supervision for my drug possession charges. Ooh. Does this court as a guilty plea under immigration law?
So the answer to this one is yes, it does. We often have a lot of people come to us and say, well, I didn't take a guilty plea, I just had court supervision. The problem is that court supervision, often when we get the certified disposition, will show up as a guilty plea. It'll say guilty and the sentence is court supervision. Oftentimes, criminal lawyers do not explain this very well. They'll say, no, it's not a guilty plea. I've had criminal lawyers actually tell their clients, no, this is not a guilty plea. It is a guilty plea. So like Anthony said, the best thing to do is fight it. We often tell people that they should try to work with the prosecutor. Maybe they could let the prosecutor know, I will go and do some sort of community service voluntarily on my own, not as a sentence of the court. And then once they're done with that, they can come back to the court and the court can just drop all charges. Really, the court just wants to see that this person is reformed and maybe they paid their debts to the community for whatever small crime they've done. So in that case, there's things that we can do to make sure that there is no actual guilty plea on your record. Court supervision, again, is definitely a guilty plea. Saki?
Thank you very much, Lauren. Well, it's good to know. It's very interesting. Okay, so now we talk about many different type of crimes, and I was wondering, how about like a kidnapping situation? Like, people going through the divorce, want to take my child with me, that kind of situation. Do you have any comments for that, Anthony, Lauren?
Well, absolutely. And, Lauren, you can kind of chime in also as we discuss this a little bit. We wanted to do something a little bit different. And it doesn't happen all the time, but like Saki mentioned, we do have cases in the past where, a U.S. citizen or maybe a green card holder marries a foreign national, and unfortunately the relationship doesn't work out. And we have a child, or children involved in that situation. And usually what will happen is the foreign national, not always, but usually the foreign national will pick up with the child and head back to their home country. And when we talk about these crimes, remember, there's 50 states with territories, and each of these states have their own laws. So, what we're talking about here, it's very general. You really need to speak and work in concert or in relationship with that criminal attorney to make sure you're dealing with the proper level. So kidnapping, depending on the state you're in, depending on how it was conducted and what you're charged with, may or may not be what we call a crime of moral turpitude. And I'm going to share my screen maybe when Lauren is speaking, but I'm going to share a screen that kind of gives a definition of what a crime involving moral turpitude is. It's a big fancy word that unfortunately our Congress did not define very well, and it's really, really all over the place, as we're dealing with that. But, we had one client who took their child back to Japan, and we looked at the international laws about how to get them back in, and it can be a problem. The main thing to do is work in concert with your immigration attorney and a family law attorney. And oftentimes in that particular situation, we were working also with a Japanese, an attorney in Japan to make sure that, we could locate the child and, move forward there. Lauren, do you have any similar experiences?
So what I would also mention too is that just because one case goes one way, a lot of it's also going to depend on that individual officer who's handling your case. So one officer may look at the facts and say, okay, yes, this person has this charge or this issue. Ambulance in the background. And another officer may say something entirely differently. You want to present the best case always. For that exact reason, right? Because you are never sure what officer you're going to get, whether at the Department of State or at USCIS. You want to be able to convince them that, like Anthony said, looking at the facts of the case, looking at all these issues, and looking at specifically the state law that's involved in your case, everything is going to go smoothly. Another thing I would bring up that people don't realize, I know maybe it was like 5 years ago, I'm not sure if they're still doing this, but sometimes they were thinking of charging people who brought their children with them illegally across the border as kidnapping or child trafficking. So there's, even though that person was the parent and all they're doing is bringing their child, since the child was in their full control, maybe an officer could consider it as a trafficking charge as well. So there's a lot to think about with these types of issues.
Yeah, I want to throw up the definition. Hopefully, we can see it. So there's a couple definitions out there. The first one is by the BIA. And this gives you sort of a definition of crime that refers generally to conduct that is inherently base, vile, or depraved, and contrary to the accepted rules of morality and the duties owed between persons or to society in general. Also, a special Senate, when Congress put this together many, many years ago, back in the 50s, this is the definition that they came up with. So it's very broad, it's not well defined, and, courts have really been challenged to deal with this. One of the humorous things that I like that was said about this is, this definition of moral turpitude makes no sense. And I think a lot of us immigration attorneys feel that way, that, it just, each state you go to, it changes all the time, and for this decade, maybe, or in this state, maybe abuse or, domestic violence may or may not be a crime of moral turpitude. In a different decade, a different court, it's going to be very different. So there's no continuity that we see really with the court system. And literally almost every decade, it's always changing as they try to improve on the definition in the courts. But this is what we're faced with. So kidnapping, it may or may not be. Obviously, follow the laws. If you are in an abusive situation and you feel that you need to flee to your country, make sure you talk to your immigration attorney, family law attorney before you pick up your kids and flee to safety. Any other thoughts you may have that we can help people who are either in the situation of kidnapping, Lauren, that you can think of?
I guess the other thing would be documenting everything. So yeah, a lot of the times when we see this, it's situations where maybe it's an abusive relationship. So the more documentation you have that this is an abusive relationship, police calls, police reports, if there, this is getting really serious, but if there are injuries, you would have to take photos, document those with a time and date stamp. Telling other people, such as coworkers, friends, family members, religious authorities in your life, so that other people can testify if needed later on that, yes, this really was occurring. He or she didn't just make this up as a defense later on, because really they just wanted to go home and they wanted their kids to go with them, right? So making sure that everything is there in it's needed in the future.
And last, before we move on to our next question, call 911. I know if you're in fear or something happened, call 911. Which is probably different in many countries. The police really does want to help and protect you, and that's the best way to sort of document and get the evidence we'll need. Never listen to someone that threatens you that you're going to lose your green card if you call the police. You're not. Okay, there's ways that attorneys can help you keep your green card, stay in the U.S. if you are a victim. So that's it for kidnapping. Saki, take us to our next question.
Thank you. There was lots of important information. I guess like when anyone's in that kind of situation, it's always good to ask for help in many ways. And then I guess like when you feel stuck, it doesn't mean that there's only one way, there's a multiple way if you ask for help. So that's a great information. All right. Next question is to Anthony. My criminal record has been expunged. Can immigration find out about my criminal history?
The quick answer, absolutely. The government knows everything about you. The nice thing about expungement or getting a crime expunged is simply it allows you locally on a civil level. Let's say you're looking for a job or someone is checking your background, they're not going to see that crime is there. That's the benefit. However, for federal government immigration purposes, anything you have done in the past, whether that was when you were 15 or 25 or whether you're 80, the government knows you have to disclose it. Expungement does not clear the record for your immigration case. I was in this debate with a potential client the other day, and he was saying, oh, but it says it was reopened, or no, it wasn't reopened, but it was dismissed. Okay, it was expunged and it was dismissed, but it wasn't reopened and thrown out, which is what is key. Now, expungement and getting a case reopened and dismissed are two separate things. Expungement doesn't say you didn't commit the crime. It just says that it's not going to show up on your records. Whereas if you reopen a case and you get it thrown out or dismissed, that's going to clear you from all culpability, it's gone. And that's really what you want. That's why when Lauren was speaking earlier, go ahead, contact your immigration attorney or work in connection with the criminal attorney to reopen that case. And on that point, don't wait. We have some people that come to us and it's like, hey, I had a felony 10 years ago or assault and battery 10 years ago. What can I do now? It is to your advantage to resolve the issue first at the time of the hearing, but more importantly, if you've already pled guilty or have been found guilty, to resolve it as soon as possible.
Okay, thank you, Anthony. All right, so we've been talking about so many different type of crime, and then I think we need a little break from this heavy topic. Let's go to the fun questions. All right, Anthony, can you speak more than one language?
I usually joke around and I tell people I only speak one, that's English. I have studied other languages. In one of the videos we have on our YouTube channel, I kind of speak about this, but in Japanese, not English. But when I was growing up, I used to go to our library and we had those big LPs, records, and all the language programs and everything were on there. And I actually studied Polish a little bit because where I was working at, there was a Polish lady working with me. So I wanted to find out a little bit about that. I actually studied a little Chinese, a little Japanese before I went to university. But in university, I ended up majoring in Japanese because I knew I was going to law school. I also took some Chinese as well. So probably conversationally, I speak Japanese. Obviously, we have wonderful Japanese staff on board to work with our Japanese clients. But I also have studied Spanish and Chinese. I just enjoy foreign languages. It gives me a bridge to communicate with people. One of the examples before I turn it over to Lauren and Saki is when I was in Taiwan, it was really cool because there they spoke Taiwanese. An older lady spoke Taiwanese. She didn't speak Mandarin, which I had studied, so we couldn't communicate in Mandarin, but she spoke Japanese because of the prior Japanese occupation. So I didn't speak Taiwanese. She didn't speak Mandarin, so we were able to communicate in Japanese to some extent, which was really cool. I was at a Chinese wedding many years ago of a friend of mine. So that's the gift and the benefit of speaking other languages. You really can connect to people and really get to know their experiences and their backgrounds.
And yeah, I would say I am decently fluent in Spanish. We do Spanish webinars, so I can get my point across and definitely communicate with people. Always trying to work on it because my accent is something that needs a little bit of work, as if you are a Spanish viewer, you probably know. But, you know, the main thing is being able to converse with people. So I can do that. No other languages other than English and Spanish. I wish, but, you know, still trying to master Spanish before I go on to the next language. Saki?
Me, I'd say with Japanese differently. I was born there. But I also speak Southern accent Japanese. It's the same Japanese, but I can't just, it's another language almost. And then now I speak English. I'm still learning English. I try to study other language, but more I study, more I try to memorize the vocabulary, then I forget either Japanese or English. So I think 2 languages is my brain capacity. So hopefully one day I can do 3rd, but we'll see.
Well,
All right.
Saki, before you
Yeah.
before you go, you guys were talking about accents. I had a funny story. I was studying Japanese for many years, thought I knew a lot, and I was in Japan hiking with some friends, and of course I was speaking Japanese. I didn't think anything of it, and this was in the Kansai area, near Osaka and that area. So we, after hiking, this young kid, probably kindergarten or something like that. It was so funny. In Japanese, he goes to his mom, Anthony, why is Anthony speaking Michigan dialect? And it was so humorous and kind of embarrassing because I was making my own Japanese dialect up, even though it never existed. So from a young person's standpoint, this person was speaking Japanese, but it was in a dialect he didn't understand. So he assumed instead of the Kansai dialect, it was some Michigan dialect from where I came from. So I thought that was cute. So I often tell people my Japanese is a Michigan dialect. It's not standard Japanese or something like that.
That sounds so funny. Oh my goodness. I always have an issue that when I go to Japan, the people don't think I'm a Japanese and then they think I'm a foreigner. So every time when I speak Japanese, they're like, oh my God, your Japanese is so good. And I was like, yeah, I'm from here. And then they're like, well, but it's so good. And I was like, yeah.
Or when
You know?
Chinese people here just start speaking to you in Chinese.
Oh, yeah,
You have to
yeah.
say, like,
A day for it. Yeah. Yeah. So I can be anyone, I guess. Okay. So, well, that was a fun time. And then now we're going back to the crime topic again. Okay. This is a question to Lauren. I didn't realize that my community service sentence counted as a guilty plea. Otherwise, I never would have accepted. Is there anything that I can do after the fact to make the case go away?
So yes, there is. It is very difficult and it may not work, but you can try. So one thing we've done in the past is you have to have an agreement with the prosecutor. If the prosecutor doesn't like you, or maybe they're too busy, or they think that you haven't really been reformed enough, or they just don't agree, you won't have anything to do. But if you talk to the prosecutor, let them know what's going on, and maybe convince them that, you know, this was all in the past and you've been a changed person since then, and explain the implications for your immigration status, the prosecutor does have the power to reopen the case. If once the case is reopened, you and your criminal law attorney can file a joint motion to dismiss the case, or the prosecutor can drop all the charges. Obviously, the judge has to agree as well. Normally, the judge will do whatever the prosecutor wants to do. They don't really have much opinion. So as long as the prosecutor is okay with that, it may take some months, right? So the prosecutor is going to be a busy person. They have a lot of cases, but eventually they can reopen the case and they can basically nullify the result and go back to, case reopen and charges have been dropped or nullified. In that case, once you get, your court records for your immigration case, it will still show that you were arrested and ultimately you were had a guilty plea, but the final outcome of your case, the final outcome will be that case was dropped and it technically is not on your record. So in that case, you would be able to, sometimes if people have more than one crime, you really need at least one of those to go away to get rid of that. There's an exception, for people who only have, maybe one crime in their past a long time ago. USCIS or the Department of State can kind of overlook that. So you really need, if you have 2 crimes or more, to get rid of one of them. So in that case, an officer is allowed to go through and say, well, technically this person only has 1 crime, and maybe, you have a lot of community service, not court mandated, just general volunteer work, things like that. You're involved in your family life, you pay all your taxes. The officer can then go ahead and improve your case. So there are things you can do. Definitely talk to an immigration and a criminal law attorney, or an immigration attorney or criminal law attorney who does both. It can't just be one, to get that resolved, to see if there's any hope for your case in the future. Saki?
Thank you, Lauren. All right, next question is to Anthony. My girlfriend, who is a lawful permanent resident, was found guilty of copyright infringement. Oh, now she's in the removal proceeding. That's not good. Can she still file a naturalization?
Yeah, before I jump into this question, everyone who's on the chat or watching live, feel free to say hello or, ask a question. We're looking at the comments or chat to see, this is your time to ask questions, not just to listen in. If you have a question, ask it, put it on there. If you don't want to put it out there in the public, feel free to email us. We're going to put our contact information at the bottom. You'll see that with phone numbers, email address of how to reach out to us. So please do that. Let's get into copyright infringement. A lot of people really don't think about this, but let's say you're misusing information off the internet, or you take information from someone else's publication and you use it inappropriately. That can be a crime involving moral turpitude. So you have to be careful. So in this case, where we have a green card holder who is in removal proceedings, it's going to be tough. So first of all, while you're in removal proceedings, normally you cannot file for naturalization, even if you think you qualify. Why is that? Because if you're in removal proceedings, the court's going to issue, the ICE agent or the trial attorneys are going to issue what's called the notice to appear, or NTA. And that sort of stops the clock. That sort of cuts off your status at that point. Now, before you can go back to try to naturalize, you've got to get that green card status back. Now, the good thing is, depending on your situation, there may be several options you may have in order to stay in the United States. There is, for example, cancellation or removal for green card holders or people who were green card holders. So there's certain specific requirements for that. You want to sit down and make sure that your immigration attorney carefully analyzes your facts and situations and actually sits down and explains them to you. If an attorney's not sitting down and going through that and taking the time to go over your case and speak with you, you want to find an attorney that's going to do that. You want to find an attorney that's going to care about your case, not just take your money. So in this case, can they still file for naturalization? No, not at this time. You must resolve the removal proceeding. Now, also the removal proceeding could be that maybe the NTA or something was inappropriately issued and you get the case thrown out. And the person goes back and either renews their green card status or they're still in green card status. So it really depends on the facts of the case, but naturalization, you're going to have to wait until you deal with that removal before you can move forward with naturalization. Okay, I hope that helps.
All right, thank you, Anthony. I have one more question. How about for this situation? I have a pending criminal case here in the US, and will this impact my H4 extensions?
Well, absolutely. It will impact your H4 extensions. So, oftentimes, once you're granted a status, let's say H4 for 3 years, during that 3 year period of time, the USCIS and other immigration departments normally do not proactively check your status to see if something has happened. However, in the application for your extension, there's going to be questions of, were you arrested? Did something happen? And you have to answer honestly and disclose that at that time. Now, for certain H4s, they don't do the whole biometrics again. However, if you're answering honestly, like you should be, then that's going to raise some flags and you're going to have to provide proof to substantiate whatever took place in your case or situation. So, yes, it will impact your H4 extension. So make sure you work closely with your attorney handling that extension to make sure you don't find yourself in removal proceedings or unfortunately deported.
I see. Okay, so I'm learning so many different words today. Here's another word that I need to get some information. So this is a question to Lauren. What is the crime involving the moral turpitude?
Yeah, so Anthony put up that definition earlier. A crime involving moral turpitude is, in layman's terms, it's a morally bankrupt crime, right? So this is going to vary, like we said, in each state, in each location. But in general, if a crime sounds like it's a bad crime, it probably is. So here's the definition. So, for example, shoplifting, right? That kind of has a negative connotation to it versus other crimes such as like a traffic ticket. So that's going to be a crime involving moral turpitude. It's a moral crime. We don't like that type of behavior. However, there are other crimes that maybe you would think would be a crime involving moral turpitude, but most of the time they're not. So a battery, for example. For those who don't know, a battery is hitting someone. So, unless it's aggravated, I don't want to say blanket statement, all batteries are not crimes involving moral turpitude. Speak with your attorney. But in general, usually a battery is actually not considered a crime of moral turpitude, even though maybe someone got in a drunken bar fight and hit someone, right? So, it can be confusing, but, in general, first of all, don't commit crimes. But second of all, if it's a moral crime such as drugs, shoplifting, maybe some sort of sex crime, something like that, that's generally, it sounds bad, it probably is. Err on the side of caution, but definitely check with your attorney, because maybe if you just have a bar fight, USCIS isn't going to care. I don't know. So, well, I do know because I'm an attorney. It depends on your state. So in Illinois specifically, I can speak to, they will not care unless, they care because if you have multiple records. But in general, if you just have one battery on your record, you should have no issues moving forward with your case. And if someone came to me and they said, I just have a simple battery case, one on my record, I would feel very confident moving forward with that type of application. So.
I see. Thank you, Lauren. So I guess it's always good to have good to know that, like, at least one attorney, like, just in case you get in any trouble. So if anyone listening this, and then if you ever get in trouble, just remember our law firm, Ray Law International, and then please contact us. We are always there for you. Okay, so the next question is to Anthony. My friend was arrested on the felony drug charges. However, the prosecutor dropped those charges, and my friend ultimately only plead guilty to our misdemeanor. How do you pronounce it? Misdemeanor traffic offense. Will this impact my friend's F1 application?
Well, the good thing is the actual F1 visa application here in the US, it should not negatively impact the case. However, there are other agencies such as the Department of State. So in the US, when you file, because the drug charges were dropped, that means you're not going to have to deal with those drug charges, which is fantastic because while many people can overcome some of those drug charges, it can cost you. I mean, upwards of $15,000-$20,000 to deal with that and to fight that in court. So if they're dropped, wonderful. Now, the misdemeanor traffic offense, perfect. Remember, we were talking about traffic offenses, depending on what it is for the misdemeanor, it should not be a problem. It should be more along the lines of a petty offense. But always, what we do when we get crimes, we always want to look at the statute in that state. And what is the definition and what's the maximum penalty? So you have to look at all of that. Now, where does this become a problem if you go back home and try to get that visa stamp? Well, you were charged with the drug crime and it was dropped. That's great. But the Department of State has the ability and authority to look at that police report to see what really happened. And what you want to avoid is to make sure that they don't think that you are using drugs and are addicted to some illegal substance. Then they could have you go and get tested for drugs or alcohol, which is common. And we see this often for people who get DUIs, driving under the influence or drinking and driving. When that happens, under the law, the police are theoretically supposed to automatically notify the U.S. embassies. So the next time you go, they're going to double check to make sure you're not a drunkard or still using alcohol, which is at a different level. So remember, we talked earlier about the difference of marijuana. At the federal level, they look at it different than at the state level. We're going to want to be very careful. So any criminal activity, talk to an attorney, get it in writing so that you have clarity. Don't just listen and it's like, well, Attorney Joe Schmo said something and I trusted him. And then you find yourself in a difficult situation. You don't want to do that. So in this case, it's good. Yes, you're going to get your your F1 application is going to be approved. But when you go for your visa stamp application, depending on what's in that police report, you may, worst case scenario, be asked to do some drug testing. Make sure you don't do any drugs or drinking while you're in your home country, even if it's legal in that country, of course. Hopefully that gives you some guidance.
Thank you very much, Anthony. All right, next question is to Lauren. The immigration officer told me that I need to submit the certified disposition. What is that?
Sorry, let me unmute myself. So a certified disposition is going to be an official record from the court of your court case. This is not just going to be you going to the police and getting a printout of the application. This is an official court document that is going to have some sort of raised seal or special stamp from the court, and it's going to be an original piece of paper. We cannot we just submit copies and then we'll have you bring the original document to your interview. If you lose the original document, you will have to obtain a new one directly from the courts. So these are, again, official documents, and each court is going to look a little bit different. Some of them, like I said, have stamps, some of them have raised seals. So it really depends on the jurisdiction in which you committed the crime that's going to be able to tell what your document will look like. But if you go to the court, they will know exactly what you're talking about because they deal with these all the time. So, just whenever you give them a call or go into the office, let them know, hey, I need certified dispositions. We recommend obtaining multiple at a time. That way you don't have to go back. If you have a green card interview, maybe it's for your conditional residency. Later on, you have to submit one to remove the conditions on your residency, and later you have to submit one to renew your green card or naturalize. So you're going to want to have multiple of those originals to do that. Unfortunately, even if your case is expunged, you're going to need a record. If your case is expunged, the court will not be able to give you dispositions. So you'll have to reopen your case, obtain the dispositions, and then expunge it again. So definitely be sure to get many copies or original documents, I should say, from the court prior to expunging anything on your record so that you have that for immigration. Saki?
Thank you, Lauren. Okay, so how about this situation? My mother was arrested in the 90s, but the police and the courts have no record of it. What should we submit to immigration? This is a question to Anthony.
Yeah, we get this quite often where people have older crimes and the states, either, don't have record of it or they, get rid of it. They don't, there's no record of it and the USCIS is asking for it. You want to show that you've taken every effort in order to obtain the court records or police records. So what you want to do, if it's not available in either situation, is try to get that agency to provide you with some evidence that it's unavailable and you've tried or attempted when you submit your application. Typically, when we do that for our clients, we don't have problems proceeding. The USCIS cannot force or deny you a benefit for something that, isn't available or not there. Now, oftentimes, we also put it back on the part of USCIS because they have more authority, more tools to kind of dig within the government in order to get the information that they need. So feel free, and sometimes I put it in our responses that, hey, we're unable to get access to these documents. However, the USCIS may have the authority or, access to whatever information to see if they can obtain it. Another thing we try to do is many states have what's called archives. And you're going to want to see, if not at that office or court, to see whether they can dig into their state archives, or if it's something federal, into the federal archives, maybe through the FBI, to see if we can get that document. It may take a lot of work, but it's better to do all the work up front than wait for the USCIS to give you, let's say, 90 days or 86 days in order to get that document. So start early, work with your attorney. Sometimes you can get those documents with a lot of work and digging. Other times, if you just can't get it, document that you tried and get some kind of notification that it's unavailable by the police or courts. That's how I would proceed on that.
Thank you very much. All right, the question to Lauren. My husband is a U.S. citizen who is in jail for money laundering. Can he still petition for me?
So short answer, yes. A U.S. citizen who has any number of money laundering crimes, pretty much any crime, can petition you. The one exception is sex crimes. If your U.S. citizen spouse has a sex crime on his or her record, there's something called the Adam Walsh Act, and that may prohibit your spouse from petitioning for you. It does not 100% prohibit them, however. So what we would need to do is demonstrate that this person has been reformed and that they now have good moral character. Hopefully that crime is in the past many years, and since then that person has rehabilitated, they're a functioning member of society. Usually we'll send them to get a psychological evaluation to make sure that a doctor will sign off and say, yes, this person has been rehabilitated. Another thing you should know, if you are a U.S. citizen petitioner, this is something embarrassing that happened in your past long ago. USCIS and or the Department of State will disclose this information to your fiance if your fiance or spouse is attending an interview. It will be disclosed. They will find out about it and given the option to say, hey, once I found out about this, I really don't want to deal with this, and to end the process. So keep that in mind. This will not remain a secret. You do have to disclose it to USCIS, and USCIS will disclose it to your fiance, spouse, what have you. Saki?
Okay, thank you, Lauren. I was curious, is there any inappropriate plea deals for immigration related or something like that? Do you have any example, Anthony or Lauren?
Lauren, you want to start off?
Inappropriate plea deals? I'll let Anthony start with this one.
Okay, so oftentimes what this is really centered on is a lot of people will just go ahead and plead to whatever their criminal defense attorney says without talking about the immigration impact. And that's when it's wrong. Typically what I say about the criminal defense, and sorry for all the criminal defense attorneys out there, oftentimes we go through this and it's just the mill. We just push people through like cattle call. How many DUIs? We've got 20 on the docket. Let's move through, and just plead guilty. And oftentimes we'll see people who have immigration situations and they slip through the system. They may be green card holders. They may be here on a visa. They may overstay their status. They may be here illegally. And the attorneys just say, hey, there's nothing we can do. Plead guilty. Let's move on. And so we really, really are speaking to those people in those situations or family members you have. If you're a foreign national, let's just say if you're not a U.S. citizen, you need to always, if there's some criminal activity that you're involved with or being charged with, you need the advice and guidance of an attorney, an immigration attorney, as well as your criminal defense attorney. Some attorneys practice both areas. We tend to work with other criminal attorneys throughout the country to make sure that you guys get the best representation. So mainly, first and foremost, don't plead until you get support. I got a couple stories of our experiences that we've had in our office, but I'll let Lauren jump in and give some insight as well.
Yeah, so what I would say also to that is if that happened to you, like I said, you may be able to reopen the case and have the prosecutor drop the case. One thing that can help that is if you talk to that criminal attorney and say, hey, you didn't advise me that this would impact my immigration status. So if possible, talk to that attorney. Maybe that attorney can vouch for you and let the prosecutor know, hey, I didn't really fully advise this person. Maybe the attorney doesn't want to do that, but if they do, if they want to help you out and say that to the prosecutor, maybe the prosecutor will take that into account in thinking of whether or not they should reopen your case.
Absolutely. And some of the situations we've had is mainly non-immigrant visa holders. Let's say they're in H4, F1, whatever it may be, and they are facing, certain charges such as child neglect. They left their kid in the car because they wanted, the kid was sleeping and they just wanted to go into Walmart, grab some stuff and come back. And they get charged with something like that. Or maybe in your culture, it's okay to slap your kid and discipline them in that way. But in the U.S., you can't do that. So in those sort of situations, we're often contacted to write a memo to the judge and let the judge and also the prosecutor understand that, hey, if this person pleads guilty to this, this is how it's going to impact their immigration status and in the future when they apply for a visa. And oftentimes it may not change or impact your status here in the US, but as soon as you step out and then you go apply for your new visa and you've got to disclose it, that's when sometimes I guess all hell breaks loose and people panic and I can't get back into the US, help me. And the time to take care of that is always at the time you're in the initial court proceedings regarding that criminal matter.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, we learned a lot today, and it's already 1 hour now. That was really fast. I guess the one big thing I learned today is just if you ever get in trouble, just contact the attorney. Like you can Google it all the time for what you've done, but it's always good to ask for the professional people. I think that's the fastest way to solve your situation. Okay, Anthony, do you want to say something to close?
Everyone, thank you for joining us today. Just on a side note, for all those people out in Japan, we were talking about Japanese. There was an earthquake recently in the Fukushima area. We just want to keep those people in mind. There's so much happening around the world. Hopefully everyone is safe. So be safe out in Japan, in the Fukushima, Tokyo area. And as well, once again, for our Ukrainian brothers and sisters, everyone get out there, support them, do what we can to help keep freedom alive in democracy. Thank you guys for joining us.